What if I told you that over 2,000 years ago, an empire stretched from the dusty plains of Afghanistan to the lush rice paddies of Bengal? That in an age when travel meant weeks on horseback and messages were carried by foot, one dynasty ruled over nearly all of the Indian subcontinent. This is the tale of the Mauryan Empire, an empire of grand vision, ruthless strategy, and rulers whose stories echo across the corridors of time. It wasn't just an empire of land and armies, but one of philosophies, revolutions, and legacies that still shape India today. At the heart of this tale are three kings: Chandragupta, the fearless founder; Bindusara, the iron-fisted successor; and Ashoka, the emperor who traded bloodshed for Dharma. This isn't your average history lesson. It's a story of ambition and betrayal, of dreams and transformation, of war and peace. A story that started with a boy from a humble background and ended with one of the most enlightened rulers in world history. Welcome to the story of the Mauryan Empire, India's first great dynasty. Before the Mauryan dynasty roared into existence, India was a fractured canvas, a mosaic of kingdoms, republics, and rival powers. And at the heart of this churning world stood a city that would become the nucleus of Indian power, Magadh. Situated in the modern-day state of Bihar, Magadh wasn't just a city, it was a powerhouse. With its fertile soil, abundance of iron ore, and a location that connected trade routes from north to south, Magadh was the jewel of the Gangetic Plains. Here, power wasn't just exercised, it was born. The Ganges River flowed through its lands like a life vein, feeding its people, energizing its economy, and providing a natural barrier to invaders. With thick forests and mineral-rich hills to the south and west, and the Himalayas guarding the north, Magadh became both a fortress and a crown. And from this land of wealth and warfare rose the Nanda Empire. The Nanda dynasty ruled from around 343 BC to 321 BC. It was founded by Mahapadma Nanda, a man who rose from humble origins, possibly of Sudra descent, to build one of the largest armies India had ever seen. He was ruthless and efficient. Mahapadma defeated small neighboring kingdoms one by one, gobbling up land like a flame, devouring dry grass. His empire stretched across northern India, and at its peak, the Nandas were reportedly in control of most of the subcontinent's wealth. And their military? Enormous. Greek historians wrote in astonishment about the Nanda's army: 200,000 infantry, 20,000 cavalry, 2,000 war chariots, and 3,000 elephants. Some accounts even suggest the numbers were inflated by their reputation more than reality, but regardless, their military might was feared. But the Nandas, despite their power, were not loved, especially the last of them, Nanda. While Nanda sat on the throne in Pataliputra, another storm was brewing in the far west. A young Macedonian general named Alexander the Great had already conquered Persia, Egypt, and much of the known world. And now he turned his gaze eastward. In 326 BC, Alexander crossed into India through the Khyber Pass, entering the lush and wealthy lands of the Indus Valley. He came not just for gold or glory, but because tales of India's riches had reached even the Mediterranean. Tales of elephant armies, fertile lands, and untold wealth. In battle after battle, Alexander defeated independent kingdoms and tribal confederacies. The mighty King Porus in the Battle of the Hydaspes gave him one of the toughest fights of his campaign, but even he bowed after defeat. But Alexander never made it to the Gangetic Plains. His army, weary and homesick, refused to march further east. He turned back and shortly after died in Babylon. Still, his invasion left behind a legacy: Greek outposts, soldiers, administrators, and, more importantly, disunity. The northwestern territories of India were now fragmented. Local kings fought among themselves, and the central power of India, the Nanda Empire, had no control there. And this exact moment of weakness opened a door for someone bold enough to walk through it. History often remembers kings as born leaders, divinely chosen, born in palaces, cradled in gold. But Chandragupta Maurya's story begins not in a palace, but in obscurity. He was not born with a crown on his head. Instead, he was born into hardship, a pastoral family, likely in the regions near present-day Bihar or Punjab. There are conflicting legends about his caste and origin. Some say he was of the Shudra class, others say Vaishya, or even that he had Kshatriya lineage on his mother's side. What is clear, however, is this. In a world dominated by upper caste elites, Chandragupta was an outsider. According to Jain texts, his parents had either died early or abandoned him, circumstances that forced the young Chandragupta to fend for himself. He was sold to a hunter in a nearby village. He spent his childhood among commoners, playing in muddy fields, herding cattle, and observing life from the very bottom of society's rigid hierarchy. And yet leadership flowed through his veins. One day fate intervened. It is said that the great scholar and strategist Chanakya, also known as Kautilya, was traveling across Magadh, gathering intelligence and looking for a means to bring down the despotic rule of Nanda, the last Nanda king. After being insulted at the Nanda court, Chanakya had sworn a personal oath to uproot the Nanda dynasty, no matter the cost. While resting in a small village, Chanakya came across a group of boys playing Raja, a game where one child played the king and the others were soldiers, ministers and spies. One boy stood out. He didn't just act like a king, he commanded. He issued orders, solved disputes, led mock battles and even punished traitors with such cunning that Chanakya was stunned. This wasn't just play, this was a natural leader in the making. The boy's name was Chandragupta. Chanakya, known for his unshakable logic and ruthless political mind, saw in this orphan child a spark that, if nurtured, could set the Indian subcontinent ablaze. Chanakya took Chandragupta under his wing. But this wasn't just a mentorship, it was an intense, grueling transformation. At Takshashila, one of the oldest universities in the world, Chandragupta was trained not only in warfare, archery and swordsmanship, but also in statecraft, administration, diplomacy and espionage. He studied the Arthashastra, a treatise written by Chanakya himself, a master manual of politics, economics, war and strategy. Chandragupta was being forged into something more than a warrior. He was being molded into a kingmaker, a visionary. Together they became a duo unlike any in Indian history, the fire and the mind, one burning with ambition, the other with purpose. But becoming king wasn't going to be a matter of ideology or prophecy. It required action, risk, blood and cunning. Chanakya knew that the Nanda dynasty could not be toppled by sheer force. Nanda ruled with an iron grip from his capital at Pataliputra. His spies were everywhere, his coffers overflowing with gold, and his army, the largest in India, was a wall no mere rebellion could break through. A direct attack would have been suicide. So Chanakya and Chandragupta did something audacious. They began their revolution not in Magadh, but in the northwest. Why? Because Alexander's invasion had left a trail of disunited kingdoms in his wake. After his departure, his generals, especially Seleucus Nicator, held sway over territories stretching from Bactria to the Indus. But the region was unstable. Greek satraps ruled over unwilling Indian subjects. Local kings and tribal leaders had declared independence. The soil was ripe for rebellion. Chandragupta and Chanakya moved swiftly. Using guerrilla tactics, diplomacy and psychological warfare, they won over local tribes, overthrew weak kings and captured strategic outposts. They promised liberation, justice and unity. Discontented soldiers and civilians from the northwest joined their cause. The army grew, momentum built, and just as crucial as their military victories were their espionage networks. Chanakya had planted agents deep inside Magadh, merchants, priests, dancers, even cooks in royal kitchens. These spies provided constant updates, sowed dissent, and slowly eroded the Nanda regime from within. Legend tells of a strategic turning point in the campaign. When Chandragupta's army was temporarily defeated by the Nandas in an early skirmish, he and Chanakya took refuge in a remote village. There, while watching a poor woman scold her child for eating from the middle of a hot plate instead of starting from the cool edges, Chanakya had an epiphany. "You don't attack the center of a burning kingdom," he said. "You start from the edges." From that day, their strategy shifted. They began conquering surrounding territories, encircling Magadh like a tightening noose. One by one, Chandragupta's army captured the outer cities and provinces. His legend began to grow. Songs were sung of the young warrior king rising from the dust. People who had suffered under the Nandas began to switch allegiance. Governors defected. Nanda's hold began to crack. By the time Chandragupta launched his final assault on Pataliputra, the city was already divided. The people welcomed him. Nanda was captured, and according to some accounts, spared by Chandragupta on Chanakya's advice. Others say he was executed as a symbol of justice. Either way, the Nandas were no more. And in 321 BC, Chandragupta Maurya was crowned the Emperor of Magadh, founder of the Mauryan Empire. But the story doesn't end there. With Magadh secure, Chandragupta now turned his eyes west toward the remnants of Alexander's empire. In 305 BC, Seleucus Nicator, one of Alexander's trusted generals, marched east to reclaim the lost satrapies of the Indus Valley. He expected an easy victory. He was mistaken. Chandragupta's army met him with force. Though exact records of the battles are scarce, Greek sources suggest a prolonged conflict that forced Seleucus to reconsider. He was fighting not a fractured territory, but a unified, disciplined empire led by a tactical genius. In 303 BC, the two sides agreed to a peace treaty. Seleucus ceded vast territories, modern-day eastern Afghanistan, Baluchistan, and parts of Iran, to Chandragupta. In return, he received 500 war elephants, animals that would go on to help him win the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC. A key event in the power struggle of Alexander's former generals. The two leaders also cemented their alliance through a marriage arrangement, possibly between Seleucus's daughter and Chandragupta, or one of his family members. And with this agreement came an influx of Greek culture into India. Art, architecture, astronomy, and diplomacy flowed across borders. It was a remarkable moment, east and west, not in war, but in cooperation. Chandragupta ruled for nearly 24 years. In the later part of his reign, he grew deeply influenced by Jainism, a religion of non-violence and self-discipline. According to Jain texts, he eventually abdicated his throne, left behind the opulence of court life, and became a monk. He journeyed to the south, where he fasted and meditated in a cave at Shravanabelagola, in present-day Karnataka, until his death. A peaceful end to a life that began in chaos and rose to greatness. With Chandragupta gone, the empire he forged stood strong, but it was far from finished. The crown now passed to his son, Bindusara. A ruler in his own right, Bindusara would inherit a vast empire and a heavy legacy. His rule would expand the Mauryan reach further south and maintain the delicate balance between diplomacy and dominion. In the next section, we delve into the reign of Bindusara, the forgotten pillar of the Mauryan Empire and the father of the greatest emperor India has ever known. Great empires often rise through war, ambition, and grit, but some begin with tragedy. When Chandragupta Maurya became emperor of a newly unified India, his legendary advisor Chanakya didn't step back. He stayed behind the curtain, still pulling strings, still protecting the throne, and that protection took a strange turn. In the palace kitchens, Chanakya started a routine. He added tiny amounts of poison to Chandragupta's food, not to harm him, but to build up resistance. If an assassin ever tried to slip poison into his meal, it wouldn't work. In an age where a sip of wine could kill, Chanakya stayed ahead of every threat, but fate had other plans. One day, by accident, the pregnant queen ate some of the emperor's food. By the time Chanakya realized it, the poison had already started its slow, deadly work. In a desperate move, he cut open her womb to save the unborn child. The baby lived, but legend says a single drop of poison touched his head. That child carried the mark forever. He was named Bindusara, from Bindu meaning drop and Sara meaning essence or strength, the power of a single drop. That origin story, half history, half myth, shaped the legacy of a prince born in the shadow of two giants, his father, Chandragupta, and his mentor, Chanakya. But Bindusara wouldn't just be remembered for how he was born. He'd be remembered for how he ruled, a prince between two eras. Bindusara was born into a unified India, but the empire was still young, still fragile. As heir to this massive realm, he carried a continent's future on his back. Chanakya, still active in Bindusara's early years, trained him in everything: strategy, logic, economics, and the Mauryan code of governance, the Arthashastra. But unlike his father, Bindusara didn't grow up in battle camps or hiding in forests. He was raised in Pataliputra, the capital surrounded by golden halls, fortified walls, and the pulse of one of the most advanced administrations of the time. His education was vast, from Sanskrit texts to Vedic philosophy, from diplomacy to warfare. He may have even met Greek scholars and envoys thanks to the peace treaty Chandragupta once signed with Seleucus Nicator. Greek historians like Strabo and Pliny the Elder called him Amitrachatis, a Greek twist on Amitragata, which means destroyer of foes. The world was watching. Bindusara wasn't just a ruler, he was becoming a name beyond India. Chandragupta built the empire. Bindusara pushed it further. According to ancient sources, Bindusara conquered 16 more kingdoms, extending Mauryan control deep into the south, reaching as far as modern-day Karnataka, possibly even Mysore. He expanded the empire between two great seas, the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. This wasn't just about land, it meant stronger trade, more resources, and tighter control over the subcontinent. But what's interesting, he didn't touch the three great Dravidian kingdoms, the Cholas, Pandyas, and Cheras. Instead of war, he may have chosen diplomacy or respectful neutrality, possibly out of strategic wisdom, cultural respect, or economic interests. Bindusara understood something powerful. You don't always need war to win. Sometimes, diplomacy is stronger than bloodshed. While the southern campaign gets the spotlight, Bindusara's real strength was his rule. Inheriting a vast empire is one thing. Keeping it together? That's the hard part. The Mauryan system, designed by Chandragupta and perfected by Chanakya, was complex layers of officers managing taxes, justice, policing, and agriculture. Bindusara didn't change the system, he refined it. He made sure roads stayed safe, markets stayed fair, and governors stayed loyal. The empire wasn't just intact, it was efficient. Even Greek records say he maintained strong diplomatic ties. He wrote to Antiochus I, son of Seleucus, requesting dried figs, sweet wine, and a philosopher. A simple moment, but it says a lot. It shows curiosity, openness, and an eye beyond India's borders. Bindusara became the bridge between the warrior king Chandragupta and the philosopher king Ashoka. He kept the empire strong, stable, and ready for what came next. Bindusara ruled for about 25 to 28 years and died around 272 BCE. He didn't retreat like his father. He didn't preach peace like his son. He ruled with quiet power, and when he passed, the empire stood tall. But as his health faded, a battle for the throne began. He had many sons, maybe 16 or more, but one stood out, Ashoka, governor of Ujjain. Ambitious, clever, and ruthless. Some say Bindusara didn't want Ashoka to succeed him. Others say Ashoka's methods were too aggressive at first, but what's certain is this: Ashoka became emperor, and his reign would rewrite history. From a poisoned drop to a southern conquest, Bindusara's life was shaped by restraint, strategy, and quiet strength. But it was his son who would carry the torch forward, starting in war, ending in peace. Next, we explore Ashoka the Great, the emperor who transformed an empire's soul and left a message carved in stone. The story of Ashoka begins not with grandeur, but in the shadows. He was born to Subhadrangi, a woman of humble origin, neither a queen nor a noble by blood. This simple truth meant that Ashoka, despite being the son of Emperor Bindusara, was never considered the rightful heir to the throne. That position was reserved for Susima, his elder half-brother, whose mother hailed from a royal lineage. Ashoka, for all his potential, was just another prince in the background, brilliant, sharp, but sidelined. However, fate has its own way of altering destinies. When a violent rebellion broke out in the northern province of Taxila, the emperor dispatched Susima to bring the city under control, yet Susima failed to quell the unrest. Ashoka was then sent as a replacement, and at just 18 years of age he pacified the region not just with force but with diplomacy, earning the trust of the people. Impressed by his swift and effective handling, Bindusara appointed him as the governor of Avanti, one of the empire's crucial provinces. This early taste of leadership only strengthened Ashoka's resolve. Soon, tragedy struck. Bindusara passed away. With the emperor gone, a storm began to brew in the royal corridors. The Council of Ministers, those who had witnessed Ashoka's leadership, backed him as the rightful successor. Susima, burning with entitlement and ambition, challenged this decision. What followed was a brutal power struggle. Tales speak of political assassinations, underground alliances, and a prince turning into a warrior. In the end, Ashoka emerged victorious. Susima was killed, some say trampled by elephants on Ashoka's orders. The prince, once ignored, now sat on the throne not as a benevolent ruler but as Ashoka, Ashoka the Fierce. Ashoka's early reign was drenched in blood and iron. His rule was swift, authoritarian, and unforgiving. It is said that his secret prison, known as Ashoka's Hell, mirrored the tortures of the afterlife described in ancient texts. Criminals, dissenters, even suspected rebels faced unspeakable horrors within its walls. His kingdom expanded, but so did the fear. Ashoka adopted an aggressive expansionist policy. He believed that a king's strength lay not in contentment but in conquest. Under his leadership, the Mauryan Empire grew, but so did administrative stress. Governance became a challenge, the treasury strained, and rebellion simmered on the fringes. Taxation increased, the peasantry bore the brunt. And with every new province, Ashoka needed more land, more control, and more revenue to sustain his administration. It was this relentless desire for expansion that led Ashoka to the eastern coastal kingdom of Kalinga, a land of prosperous trade, proud warriors, and fierce independence. But Kalinga was not just another kingdom. It was about to be the turning point of Ashoka's life. In 261 BCE, the Mauryan army marched eastward toward Kalinga. The people of Kalinga, though outnumbered, refused to bow. A war erupted, one of the bloodiest in ancient Indian history. Ashoka personally led his army into battle, determined to bring Kalinga under Mauryan control. The war raged on, houses burned, rivers ran red, and bodies lay scattered across the battlefield. When the dust settled, Ashoka stood victorious, but the price of victory was horrifying. Over 1 lakh people were killed. More than 15 lakh were displaced. Thousands perished later from disease, starvation, and heartbreak. The land once known for its beauty now resembled a graveyard. It was on this blood-soaked soil that Ashoka had his epiphany. As he walked through the ruins, stepping over the remnants of once thriving towns, he was haunted by the cries of widows, the tears of orphaned children, and the silence of the dead. This wasn't triumph, this was tragedy. That night, something broke inside the emperor. Ashoka, the man who ruled with terror, felt the weight of his sins. That war, meant to bring glory, instead planted the seed of remorse in his heart. It marked the death of Chandragupta and the birth of Dharma Ashoka, the enlightened. Ashoka renounced violence. He turned to Buddhism, not just as a faith, but as a way of life. He found solace in the teachings of the Buddha: compassion, non-violence, truth, and humility. Gone were the days of brutality. He abandoned his dreams of conquest and instead focused on building a compassionate state. His transformation was profound. He took pilgrimages to key Buddhist sites: Lumbini, Bodh Gaya, Sarnath, and Kushinagar. He convened the Third Buddhist Council to purify and preserve the teachings of the Buddha. Ashoka's efforts weren't limited to India. Through his edicts and emissaries, Buddhism traveled far and wide, from Sri Lanka to Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and even China and Japan. In this soft power approach, India bloomed like never before. Ashoka no longer ruled with fear, but with the principle of Dharma, a code of moral conduct that promoted welfare, harmony, and ethical living. He urged religious tolerance, respect for all life forms, and protection of nature and animals. He became a monarch who didn't celebrate victory in war, but victory in peace. Ashoka's journey from a ruthless tyrant to a saintly ruler is among the most remarkable transformations in history. His achievements are both spiritual and structural. He built rest houses, hospitals, roads, irrigation systems, and educational institutions. His edicts, carved on pillars and rocks across the subcontinent, stand even today as testaments to his philosophy. The lion capital of Sarnath, which once adorned his edict, is now the national emblem of India. The Ashoka chakra, carved into the heart of the Indian flag, is a direct tribute to the emperor who gave India the spirit of Dharma. In many ways, modern India still carries the legacy of Ashoka, his symbols, his values, and his vision. Yet all great tales come to an end. After Ashoka's death, around 232 BCE, the Mauryan Empire began to decline. No successor matched his intellect, vision, or leadership. Provinces began to break away. The grand empire he nurtured began to shrink. But Ashoka's story was never about territory, it was about transformation. From Chand Ashoka, the iron-fisted warrior, to Dharma Ashoka, the enlightened ruler, he carved a legacy not in stone, but in hearts. The Mauryan Empire, born out of strategy, courage, and wisdom, witnessed 3 towering figures: Chandragupta, who built the foundation; Bindusara, who expanded it; and Ashoka, who gave it soul. From the rise of a humble shepherd's son to the spread of Buddhism across continents, from war-torn battlefields to peaceful monastic gardens, the Mauryan saga is not just the story of a dynasty, but of an entire civilization. Their legacy continues in philosophies, in political ideals, in architecture, and in symbols that breathe through modern India. This was the age of the Mauryas, a time when kings did not just conquer land, but history itself. Thank you for watching Tales of History. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the past and learned something new about the events that shaped our world. If you found this video interesting, please give it a thumbs up and share it with others who love history as much as we do. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our future episodes. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating stories of history with us. And remember, history isn't just the past, it's the key to understanding our present and shaping our future.